In this video I will talk about my research, Casagrafias. I will talk about a little bit about the way how I came to the place where I am now, to the question that I am now, and the other one will be a little bit of the content of the subject. The way how I came to this subject start in Groningen, a city in the north of Holland, where there are not so much dancers, and I have to dance with the amateur dancers. I have to be more creative about the way how I was creating the dance pieces, and then I start more open to new ways of bodies, because I was used to the trained bodies with the specific reaction to the things that I was proposing, and then I start to have different answers. So the lack of dancer make me work with other people, but also make me be interested with other aspects that I could develop by myself, like a space, the memory, and other subjects that started to be important for me in the same time that I was doing a master in interactive media. Other aspect that was very important for me was to see the work of William Forsythe, and all the work, also the Erin Manning, that they were doing about choreographic objects and choreographic as independent discipline. So I started to be really interested about that, and I started to create sculptures, moving sculptures, video mapping, be interested in this kind of way. I start to develop some pedagogical exercises. I start to give workshops. I give class in the Academy of Minerva in Groningen. I gave class here in Amsterdam in Rietveld Academy. Also, I gave class with the government of Colombia to different kind of people, and I started to develop some idea about experience the space in a different way, experience the space in a transmedial way, and I create, for example, some exercises. One that I'm still using, I call choreographic chat, and is to inhabit the space and leave small notes in different spaces, depending how is our approximation, our experience in this space. So it makes that you go to different places and feel the place, inhabit the place, and make some note, leave some note in this space, and later you keep going to the space, but suddenly, because there are many people doing the same exercise, you start to go to some place and you find some note, so you can read the experience and the opinion about this place that other person have, and you can leave some answers to this experience, some add or a new note or new experience. So there start to be a conversation in the space, but also you start to inhabit the space in the way that others are doing. So you start to have a new experience in the space. Based on these workshops, I start to develop the same methodology to make some kind of events, performance, where I was inviting people, and people were doing this kind of exercise in the space. Important aspect in my search in this trip from this subject was to discover the object as a container. The object and the space is container of memory, container of information, and I see how one object in the space is depend of the position, depend the space, depend of the moment, is triggering me some memories, some sensations, some emotions, and I start to compare with the emotions and things that they were waking up in other people, and we start to have meeting points, like a similar sensations and memories and everything with other people, even if they were from another background, other culture, other country. So I start to have an idea that we share some kind of universal memory. We contain the memory also in us, many memories of what we see in the space and the objects. We are containers of memory, and the objects are containers of memory. And I start to see to appear in my work the word constellation. So I pass for the family constellations. I start to work with small toys, small objects, and organize the objects in a specific way that they were not only by self telling a story, but if I was putting other objects close, they were constellating and they were building something more dense and more with more information. I start to create performative installations that were relate completely with the public that I was going to show it. So first I have the knowledge of which people were coming to see the piece, so I was doing my work and my construction relate to these people. So I was taking sounds of them, stories of them, or I was taking my stories and make them to tell the story as it was their story, not mine. So I was like creating some kind of constellation, taking elements, and in the end, in the zine, they were appearing all these elements of all people that were participating of the piece as a public. So somehow they were seeing themselves in the piece, they were seeing elements of them, and they were trying that they was also their piece, they were also their memory, or they was not memory but memory by them. So this kind of way I start to develop this idea. I make a piece that I call Attic Heredia, where I made small constellations with toys, and I narrate the idea of some story with toys, some memories, but also these toys give me some kind of input to transform this small movement, this small play with the objects to some kind of corporal movement. After Attic Heredia piece, I made a piece called Catherine, really short time after the Attic Heredia piece, and the Catherine piece was a memory of the Attic Heredia piece. So this memory was built as a traces of this last piece. So there were index, small objects, the organization of the space was everything related to the last piece. It's like one day after the piece, or the traces of the piece, and in that piece, the public and the audience or the participants can come and transit through this space and interact with the elements, and in the end of the piece, the audience were the performer, the performers that were rebuilding the scene and make it completely something different. After this experience, the concept of memory became really important in my work. So there were two kinds of documentation to trigger this memory. One was in the moment of the action, I can be present and trigger, leave some traces about what was happening there, my own traces, my own signals, like a message for myself that here was happening something. The other one was just not being in the action and come back later and collect like a kind of like a forensic criminalistic foreign studio where you are coming and searching for traces of what was happening there.
Welcome to this installation.
During all this research, I have been creating different kind of tools, experience, or objects that are helping me to collect information. So they are like a physical tools that collect information in the way of light, in the way of sound, And also the characteristics that I have been looking in these objects are many of them are analog objects, many of them are ephemeral information, so it's about time that the moment that we are collecting information and the moment that the information is reproduced is really short, so it's ephemeral documentation. There is a documentation and exposition of the documentation that is ephemeral, and also I have been create tools for documentation that they are saving longer time the documentation. There are types of tools in documentation that have been creating that they can save information for a long time, but they can only be reproduced one time, for example. So there are different kind of documentation and different kind of memory implicit in these objects. So these objects are for me really interesting, how the memory and documentation of the events are really influenced by the time how it can be reproduced, how much time the information can be saved.